I call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, March 14th, 2016, and the time is 7 p.m. Dr. Richardson, there are some items in the table file.
Yes, in the table file you will see a copy of the PowerPoint presentation for ADSIS. We have a whole group of folks that are going to be helping us to know about how ADSIS is progressing as a midterm. We also have several additional personnel items, including appointments, increases, decreases, change in assignments, and leave of absence. And then finally, under items for information, we need to determine the need for a March 28th school board meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much. If there's no objection, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. We now have an opportunity for public comment. This is a chance for anyone residing in the Northfield Public School District to address the board. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board? Okay, seeing no one come forward, we'll move on to approval of the minutes. Board members, you have in your packet minutes from the regular school board meeting held on Monday, February 22nd, 2016. Is there a motion to approve these minutes? Moved by Jeff. Second? Second by Margaret. Is there any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes for the regular school board meeting held on Monday, February 22nd, 2016, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Announcements and recognitions. Dr. Richardson.
Okay, I have several this evening. First of all, DECA senior Will Edwards was recognized by DECA at the national level by earning the Emerging Leader Honor Award. He's one of 5 chosen from the state of Minnesota. Will earned this award by being involved in Northfield DECA at both the leader and vice president level, and having taken business courses in accounting, advanced accounting, business management, personal finance, computer applications, keyboarding, and web design. He has been a part of DECA and has made it to DECA at the state level the past 3 years in a row. He also has participated in many community-focused and community service projects. Congratulations to Will. Also, congratulations to all 25 DECA students who participated in the DECA State Tournament on March 6th through 8th. Special congratulations go to the following students. Top 12 in their events included Ariana Beebe, Kayla Huntington, and Henry Hofstad. Top 8 in their events included Tommy Gallagher and Noah Bamonte Gribus. Top tester was Audrey Kornkeven. Second in state in economics was Audrey Kornkeven, and earning a trip to DECA Nationals, scoring 4th in the state in their team role play event, Audrey Kornkeven and Noah Bamonte Gribus. On Saturday, February the 20th, the Weissman Art Museum at the University of Minnesota hosted the annual Scholastic Art Awards. Northfield High School had 4 of our students recognized as being top winners who earned Gold Key Awards at this year's contest. The Gold Key Award winners included Ben Wang, Katie Brust, Lauren Weber, and Noah Schomburg. In addition to having these 4 students recognized at a public ceremony, the Minneapolis College of Art and Design chose 8 students out of over 4,000 contest entries to receive a very special award. Our own Noah Schomburg was chosen as one of the 8 recipients for a prize worth $3,300 to attend the Minneapolis College of Art and Design pre-college summer experience on the Minneapolis College campus. Noah was chosen for this amazing honor because of his outstanding work that impressed the admissions counselors at MCAD. The cost of his summer class, room and board, as well as excursion to Minneapolis area art museums will all be covered by the prize. Noah will finish his summer experience in July with 3 full college credits, so congratulations to Noah. Also, we'd like to congratulate Greenville Park for being selected as a winner of the Community Partner Award by St. Olaf Selection Committee in the Minnesota Campus Compact Awards for Civic Engagement. This award is for community-based organizations that have enhanced the quality of life in the community in meaningful and measurable ways and has engaged in sustained reciprocal partnership with St. Olaf, thus enriching our students' education as well as life in Northfield. Honorees and college leaders will celebrate the results of this exemplary work of civic engagement with award recipients at a special ceremony and luncheon during Minnesota Campus Compact's annual Summit and Awards Ceremony, which will be held on April the 7th at McAllister College. There will also be a local celebration held at St. Olaf in June. So again, congratulations to everyone that's been involved with our Greenville Park Community School process. I'd also like to recognize Jill Cole and TJ Weeby, who presented the 9th grade Academy presentation at the MASA Spring Conference last week. Did an excellent job in terms of sharing information about the work that's being done with the Academy. I'd also like to recognize Kim Brisky and Matt Hillman, who were schedule builders and unconference designers extraordinaire for the MASA conference, something they had never done before. And again, patterned after the unconferences that we've done here at Northfield, and gave a number of people a chance to really explore and take a look at some new areas and to really talk about those in detail in terms of things that they wanted to learn about specifically. Finally, I'd like to recognize Dr. Hillman, who also received at MASA last week the Outstanding Senate Office Leader Award. He was named with that award. He's received that award for exhibiting a willingness to risk, possessing strong communication skills, being a progressive change agent, having high expectations for self and others, and was honored at the recognition ceremony that was held last week at the Minneapolis Marriott Northwest. So congratulations to all folks, and I think some great things going on in our school district. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Is there any other announcements or recognitions, board members? No.
There was a superb concert last Saturday night at the Bow Chapel at St. Olaf with a collaboration between the high school choral groups, the high school orchestra, and the local choral group by Cantati. Superb, and I would hope that it's regular.
Excellent, thank you. Anything else? Well, we just want to extend our congratulations to Matt. That's amazing. Very well deserved.
Thank you.
So that's good stuff. Okay, so we'll move on to the first item for discussion, which is the ADSYS and multi-tiered system of support update. Dr. Richardson.
All right, I see we have a group of folks gathering to help present information tonight. Again, what we want to be sharing tonight is kind of the mid-year in terms of the work of ADSYS, and we're also going to have both Joel and Greg are going to be sharing specific information about the work in terms of MTSS at Northfield High School and Northfield Middle School, where they also have been doing some great things with the process. So it looks as though Mr. Lear is going to begin that presentation.
I will tell you, however, that when I announced to my children that I was coming back to speak to the board for the second time in a row because I wanted to, they were really confused. But they will hopefully soon get over that, because I think that the information we have to share, as well as the middle school and the district level with Cheryl, and what's happening with ADSYS is a reason to want to brag. So hopefully by the time we're done with this, you'll see really the details of why. Part of it, is if you look at the notion of what we are doing across the district, but specific to the high school, this question, why we do what we do. And the elevator speech always has something to do with, because we care about kids, we want to reach every learner and those pieces. But I think it's important to realize that truly the answer is related directly back to a systematic approach to how we perform as an institution, both as a district level institution, but also as a building. And so if we think about our mission as a school district here in Northfield, and then when you charge the DPAC team to come up with specific goals under which then we as buildings are charged to develop plans, procedures, goals, and objectives to really accomplish that elevator speech, if you will. I'm as pleased with the fact that it is purposeful, it is systematic, and it is organized as I am with the results of what we are doing with MTSS so far. And in terms of looking at our MTSS program specific to the high school and our team goals, as we think about the promotion, or the three goals: promote the achievement of all students and increase in A's and B's, reduce the failure rate of all students and promote credit acquisition, and then of course ADSYS improve the MAP MCA reading scores for students under 20%. And One of the pieces that over the years, and when we presented the site improvement goal and we've talked about what we're doing in PLCs, it's always focused in on that notion of decreasing the failure rate, increasing the passing rate. And there are some people that can interpret that as meaning, well, you're taking that group that's not succeeding and moving them up. But the secondary question to that is, well, what are you doing for all kids? And how are you using that system to promote improvement across the student population? And that's where some of the data that you'll see is really exciting to me, is that in the process of setting that goal of increasing the passing rate, decreasing the failure rate, we have moved that group of students in the middle up. And so there really is a demonstration in the data that the results of what we are doing is indeed impacting all of the students that we have here at the high school, not just those students who we identified initially as being academically at risk, or those who were failing classes here at the high school over the course of their 4 years. So that is why we do what we do.
Taller than I am. The how we do what we do. I have to say that both Carrie and I really appreciate being on DPAC, because we have the opportunity to have that 30,000-foot view and bring that back to our building level team. So how we're organized at the high school, how it's playing out this year, is really we have 4 teams that are working together to analyze data in a really systematic way. We have always had our SST, our student support team, that meets weekly to really look at really relevant information on kids weekly, and our response is immediate, quick, and we have a large team there with the assistant principals, counselors, social workers, school psychologists, the chemical health person, and our nurse. Then we move over to kind of that 30,000-foot view in the high school with our MTSS data team. And we meet monthly to review test score data, attendance data, behavior data, any of the kind of things that are going to maybe get in the way of kids being successful in our building. And from that, we're able to make placement decisions into a variety of interventions that you will learn about shortly. Similarly, we have a broad cross-section of people at that table, including the counselors, the school psychologists, someone from Torch, someone from EL, our reading interventionist, and assistant principals as well. Quarterly, we meet with our MTSS system team meeting, and that's really looking at systems level data. And then we can make recommendations for how we're going to evaluate our programs and what the next steps will be. Do we have the right interventions for the right kids? At this team meeting, we have teachers, both teachers that are mainstream teachers, AP teachers, standard levels, and it is so helpful to have their input at this team level to really say, this is how it's playing out in the classroom. This is what we're seeing. These are the things that are working well. These are the challenges that we're experiencing, and give us a sense that we have the right kids and the right interventions. And then monthly, our PBIS team looks at discipline data to determine behavioral programming, climate recommendations, and again, we have a broad section of people represented at these meetings as well, including an EA who also is a parent in our district, and some student feedback as well. We have a student team that meets and helps the PBIS team with some of the questions that we have regarding incentives and interpretation of some of our data. To give you a quick look at what this data looks like, at the data team meeting, and this is just a snapshot, obviously there aren't any student names, but we look at the risk factors that kids have around attendance, test scores, failing grades, and we give them a score. And then we look at the interventions that are being employed with that student to come up with a weighted risk. In this way, we can really make sure that we have the right fit for the right kids, and that we have a good distribution of our resources. At our MTSS systems team, this is the type of data we're looking at. We're looking at D's and F's in all of our classes, our core classes, AP classes, standard level classes, and all of the other things such as the tech areas, music, etc. And then our PBIS team look at discipline data by offense over time. So then we know what are the behaviors that we're seeing, overtime, and then employing interventions and recommendations for school climate goals. And you can see that consistently attendance is our biggest issue, whether it's excessive absences, tardies, and unexcused absences, and then we can make recommendations around how we're going to address that. How do we make it so that kids want to be here and they can be successful learners, given the barriers and obstacles that keep them from coming to school. With these 4 teams, we have had really extraordinary results that Carrie's going to share.
I'm the shortest of the 3. So we really rely on data to guide us. That's what we're going to get from this next section. One of the things that we've looked at is, this is an example of our semester 1 data for students who are receiving at least 1 F. It is easy to question the validity of grades because they can sometimes feel a little subjective. But I think as we go through, you'll see why it's important that we look at grades. Now, we do consume test scores as they become available to us, but at the secondary level, they really do start to peter out. And they're embargoed for an unhelpfully long amount of time. So it ends up being really summative data. And so grades are the very closest thing that we can get to a dynamic, real-time formative data. And you can see this is pretty dramatic. Our first semester failure rate, let me be clear, this is students who received at least 1 F, okay, percentage of our students. And this is the first year that our semester 1, we drop below 5% of our students. Fewer than 5% of our students received at least 1 F. The other thing we look at is A's, and this looks super dramatic, except if you look at the scale around the side. 78 to 81. So I'm like, whoa, ooh, hokey smokes. But it is the first time that it has come up above 80%. So we're hoping that that gets at the part where we're looking for all students to achieve. And well, I'll show you what as we go. This is that exact same data. It's a little bit more fine-grained longitudinally. The orange are the Fs, and the green are the As. And 2015 is at the top, and 2005 is at the bottom. And I think that's a really nice visual of showing those Fs that are dropping. And you can see that the As, they hover, but they are trending up here in 2015. The other thing that the MTSS systems team wanted to look at, in part because of this, we just really wanted to make sure we had the most robust understanding of grades, is they said, what about the GPA? You can look at a GPA out to like the 100th point, and it can be pretty sensitive to change. So we looked at, so I pulled the GPA data from our students this year as of semester 1. And you can see the average GPA for each of the classes is remarkably similar. But I think what is most noteworthy is if you, if you look at the lowest 20%, so look at 12th grade, 80% of our students have a GPA of 2.645 or higher, which I think is astonishing. And then then we moved on to say, well, who are the students in the lowest 10%? So it's anything below 2.206 is in 12th grade. And then if you look at the size of the classes, so 280 students in our 12th grade class. So that means that 28 students have a GPA that's below 2.2. And that suddenly becomes really manageable. Like, oh, well, we can target 28 students. We can track 28 students. We can get some movements on 28 students. And so that was just a really, really interesting look at the GPA data. And that came directly out of that systems team that Marnie was talking about. The other question that we want to know when we are looking at our grading data is, who are the students who are struggling? And this helps to guide us towards our interventions. If we understand who's struggling, we know what we need to do or who we need to target. So here are our Ds and Fs by gender. And you can see that our males fail at a slightly higher rate than our females. I don't know that that's a big surprise. But when I presented this to the staff, it really introduced some interesting conversation and reflection on their own behavior. and some good conversation literally in the hallway. I think Marnie and I both had the experience where we like came across conversations in the hallway of staff saying like, how about that gender difference? What do you think? Do you know what's going on in your class? But that was a great conversation. And then I looked at the failure rate across time at a bunch of demographic variables. And the only one that was really striking to me was our free and reduced lunch membership. I'm going to be as clear as I can in these next two slides. I think they're really interesting and really important for us at the high school to think about. So you can see 2008 to 2015. This is all from Viewpoint, by the way. Viewpoint, I was not able to get any, we were not collecting free and reduced data prior to 2008. Does that seem right? No. Nope.
Viewpoint will only go back so far.
Well, I can go back to 2005 in most other details, but I couldn't get it in free and reduced. But at any rate, so this is a very nice set of data, though. So you can see that if I look at the students who failed in semester 1 in 2008, 35% of the students who received at least one F were members of our free and reduced lunch program. However, they were only 15% of our school population. So you can see there's that disproportionality. And that's what this shows across the years. I think that's pretty dramatic. And then I wanted to look at failure rate by cohort. So what percentage of the cohort was failing? And that's what this next slide is. So you can see in 2008, 6.8% of our non-free and reduced lunch students received at least one F, and 21% of our free and reduced population received at least one F. So I think that's dramatic. I think it's dramatic. 2010, like 6 times the rate. Right? It's pretty astonishing. And it's kind of funny because Joel and I were looking at the 2015 data, the semester 1 data first, and we were like, wow, look at those kids who are part of our free and reduced lunch program are failing at twice the rate. But then we look back and it's way better than failing at 6 times the rate, right? And so there is an improvement. And I think the thing that's really interesting to see is you can see that that failure rate is dropping in our free and reduced lunch cohort. So if you recall how our percentage of students who are receiving at least one F was dropping in that early slide, it is explained almost entirely by that population. So fewer students from that population are failing our classes. Does that make sense? I think that's good information, and it also gives us a direction when we start thinking about where to intervene or what kind of behaviors we want to adopt as a school system, building system, about supporting our students. So, reflecting back, this is how all 4 of these teams work together. Reflecting back on the discipline data that we were looking at through PBIS, and across the years, our #1 behavior concern at the high school is absences. And we always kind of laugh at the PBIS meeting. Is this okay to say? Because it's like such an unglamorous behavior, we're not going to make a big impact with the brawls. There are no big brawls that we can have an impact with. But this is important because if you look at what percentage of our students have greater than 12%, we know that 12% starts at, well, greater than 10%, but greater than 12% starts to have a significant impact. That is a significant loss of instructional time. And I should make something clear too. Viewpoint does this thing that's super helpful. It'll give us absences by day or absences by period. And I always calculate by period. So they have missed 12% of instructional periods and not days, because I think that is what's important, right? And so then I looked at 2 populations who are at high risk. And I want to be clear here. I did not go through and do a nice, tidy statistical, sort of inferential statistical analysis. There is a lot of overlap in these 2 populations. These are not distinct populations. They have a lot of interaction. But I think it's okay in terms of thinking about it in broad terms to say these are at-risk populations, and 35% of those populations are missing 12% or more of their instruction. And suddenly, when you think about our failure rate, that starts to maybe come together too. Well, maybe there's just less instruction that's happening for some of these students. It doesn't explain everything, but it is that kind of discussion that we're having at our teams that help us kind of move forward and decide what we're going to do next. Is that clear so far? So what are we doing to respond to this data when we look at our students at the high school? The high school is just astonishing. I have to say, Joel and Marnie and Jeff are incredibly supportive of like any kind of intervention program that we want to put in place. They're just, it's awesome. So if you look on the left, we have these interventions: Structured Study Center, academic student coaches, the Academy, of course, which is fantastic, ADSYS, which is a fantastic addition to our kind of a repertoire this year, Torch, which is a powerhouse, and Achievement Seminar. Around the edges are some things that have been added this year or kind of in the process. Where it says compulsory, our MTSS data team that consumes those data and test scores on a monthly basis is making academic student coach contacts compulsory for some students that are continuing to struggle. OWare is OdysseyWare. We are thrilled to have some OdysseyWare licenses accessible to us at the high school, so students who are in a credit recovery situation can do that while they're at the high school. And then Academic Mentors is an idea that's really just being fleshed out, and that also came out of our MTSS systems team meeting that meets quarterly when they looked at our systems data. And then, of course, you can see our interventions intensify as they go forward. We have PL, we have special ed, we have out-of-school placements, and those all rely on some other set of criteria rather than just what we're looking at. Here are the interventions listed out. We have 355 students in supported classes and programs, which is 27.7% of our current high school population. If we pull out those EL or special education services, which can be considered a tier 3, but in particular, they're not generally something that we can place students in. They have their own federal criteria. That's 227 students, or 17.7% of our student population is in some sort of supported program placed by the MTSS data team, or data team process. Okay? Now, I want to just take a quick minute to talk about one really successful intervention that we've started this year, supported program, and that's the Achievement Seminar, Achievement Center. There are 2 rooms, H107 and H108. They're in proximity to each other, not right next door to each other. But they are quiet spaces that do not look like classrooms. They're very different. We have lots of materials available for the students. We have food always available for the students. We have chargers that are there for the students. We have iPads that they can use in the room with us. We have computers that are attached to printers so they can work and print right there and eat their food. They can plug in, they can listen to music. And then in H107 is where we have our academic student coaches too. So these have been very successful spaces for us. H108 is where we do our more structured study centers, our achievement seminar, our achievement reading, which is our ADSYS reading class. We have had 711 student check-ins, and those are the drop-in things. So students just showing up. And you can see the green column is students who are not sent by teachers. So they're just showing up to work in those spaces. They're here, the one on the left, they come to do homework, they come to have tests read. This is the other thing is we can meet the students' needs in terms of accommodations in H107 and H108. So students who have a 504, students whose teachers recommend test reading or testing in a quiet location, we can accommodate that pretty easily. I have to give Kim a little shout out here, because one of the things that we were really struggling with is scheduling our test readers. So Kim met with me and she was like, well, how about you do this Calendly program? And these are all over the building, and during finals this was fantastic, and actually last week too. Kids just use a QR scan, and they scan it and it brings them to a scheduling program, and they just schedule and it populates a calendar on my computer. And so I know I have test readers for those kids. It's really astonishingly cool. Thanks for that, it was awesome. And then they come, and you can see there's pretty much of an equal distribution of subject areas, although math is kind of heavy in biology. Lots of kids here for that. Our academic student coaches, we have 26 of them, 24 are seniors, 2 are juniors, females, males. We have 2 for whom Spanish is their first language. They have logged over 1,200 hours of coaching time. We have up to 100 hours a week And they are there every day in H107. Kids drop in. They read tests. They help study for tests. They help kids get organized. Teachers request for them to come help, like in lab day. They come help and assist with biology labs. They come to the computer center and they help edit papers in the computer center. Anything. The staff has been fantastic about walking students in, about calling down coaches. They've just really embraced it and helped make it a really successful program. And you can see what the coaches report that they work on. Most of it is that they are helping students with their coursework. And here they are. Oh, God, I just think they're fabulous. They're so great. And I just have a few pictures. My office is now in H107. So every hour of every day, I get to observe this going on. And there's our friend Audrey, who Dr. Richardson mentioned 4 or 5 times. And she's one of our academic student coaches. And this is literally what it looks like all the time. It is so fabulous. And so in development, we have refined access supports. Cheryl has a great system of we're meeting and reviewing our data. We're hoping to develop some personalized and targeted adult-aware courses that really get at some foundational skills that are lacking, which might explain why kids have failed classes and they're in a credit recovery situation. Academic mentors, again, we're looking for establishing some adults who can be true academic mentors to get kids on track. And enhanced achievement center is what it should say, including some check-in, check-out type activities to start getting at that relationship building and attendance. Increased teacher contacts, if we can get them into that achievement seminar, our center. And then continuing on with the rest of our activities. And the last thing I want to mention is that the MTSS systems team suggested a book study for us. And so Mary Grace had ordered for us Teaching with Poverty in Mind. Because this is what we understand we need to know more about with our students. And so we'll be doing a book study right away in the fall. Anything else? Thank you.
I was distracted. We were talking about that the numbers look very similar FRP in kindergarten, which seriously says
We'll be ready for 'em.
That's right. Better?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you very much.
Just checking your
After a brief panic attack, it's okay.
Good evening. Well, it's wonderful to hear what the high school has been doing in more detail. We talk about things all the time, and again, like Carrie said, or even Joel said, that whole systems approach is so important. And they really gave you that overview of what MTSS, all the tiers of intervention, are doing at the high school at this time. What I'm going to talk about a little bit, and then the middle school staff are going to join me and talk more specifically about what they're doing, is the tier of intervention that we have started this year called ADSIS, Alternative Delivery of Specialized Instruction and Supports. And we had to do a mid-year report recently and submit that, which we had a very good review coming from that report. So we're just going to do a quick refresher about ADSIS and our goals and then our curricular components. So we're really looking at reducing, the overall arching goal of ADSIS is to reduce the number of referrals to special education. So ADSIS comes to us through a funding source, a different funding source that is actually special education dollars that are reallocated into being able to be used for intervention for our students that are at risk of failing. And we are trying to reduce actually the number of students that are not meeting their MCA, the MCA standards. So we are looking at improving the number of students that are scoring below the 20th percentile in the MCAs, and trying to grow those students so that they are meeting standards, or at least partially meeting standards. Our goals this year are working in the areas of reading, math, and behavior.
All of the buildings are doing reading, and the middle school is doing math, and Greenville Park is also working on reading and behavior. The behavior component of the ADSIS intervention is very early in the stages. We were not able to hire an interventionist until about mid-October, so they're still working on getting things started in the area of behavior. The students served in ADSIS, you can see in the chart there that we have the number of students that we have in each of the subject areas, reading in each of the schools, math, and then behavior. Summary of progress of our ADSIS students so far. You can see at the elementary level, 41% of Bridgewater students, 40% of Greenville students, and 39% of Sibley students served in the ADSIS program saw growth, achieved growth at or above the 50th percentile on the winter map. So their growth from the fall map scores to the winter map scores grew at a significant rate based on the NWA conditional growth percentile, which is comparing our students to peers across the nation. So they grew at a significant rate. So we are seeing very good results from our interventions over this very short period of time, which is about 4 months of service. We've really been able to really put into place some very specific interventions targeted at our lowest performing students, not including special education students, and really help to grow their achievement in math, reading, and also in behavior. So our area of focus for this first year has really been to identify the correct students based on the criteria that we laid out in our application process. Also looking at the fidelity of implementation. We know that unless we provide our interventions with fidelity, we will not see the growth that we would like to see. Developing our ability to target the students with the most effective intervention. Again, it's talking about picking the right interventions for the right target areas. And then we're also looking at those reliable and valid measures. The NWA map gives us one measurement, and that is a snapshot and something that we can use to see and project how a student is going to do on the MCAs. But it's not the only measurement that we want to be looking at. We have lots of other measurements that we can do and other tools that we can use. Many of our new intervention software packages include a measurement tool that we are using. We also can measure progress on SPED forms, which has an RTI component. So I'm going to turn this over to the Northfield Middle School staff so they can tell you more about what they are doing.
Thank you, Cheryl. The nice thing about ADSIS and what I appreciated with the district team when we kind of came up with the concept or kind of crafted what we wanted to look like here in Northfield is that we recognize that the elementary program, the middle school program, the high school program are very different. Our students are different. We have different needs. So at the middle school, our program looks different than the high school, which you just heard from Marnie, Joel, and Carrie, how nicely that's fitting into their program. It looks differently at the middle school, just like it looks different at the elementary. At the middle school, what we've done is we created reading and math classes that are in addition to their already general ed classrooms. And just as a reminder, I believe Cheryl mentioned it, the students in 20th percentile that we're talking about, they cannot have any type of special education services, which I will kind of as a side note say has been a little bit of a frustration for us, because even if a student qualifies in speech, we can't service them for math or reading. And that does get frustrating. And we think, at least in the reading side of things at the middle school, we'll have a solution for next year for that, and we're still working on the math portion. But what we have done is we've created both 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classes in reading and in math. They're every other day classes, and they're, like I said, in addition to their regular ed classes. Rose Turncliffe, who's going to be sharing, and Dan Myers will tell you a little bit more about what they do in their class and show you some exciting results of just a few of their students, obviously without names, so you can kind of get a feel for the direction we're going. As you kind of saw some of the other data, here's a graph about our fall compared to our winter math growth. And in reading and math, as you go across, it's almost identical, both in reading and math. Our students are growing at about 70% of the students that we are servicing are showing this positive growth. And that's exciting. We weren't sure what to expect. I can actually even also say, they'll tell you a little bit about the programs are using to help, but it took us a while to get going. Some of the programs we wanted to use didn't work out the way we were hoping, and that was frustrating. But even with that early on frustrations, students settled in very nicely. I know Rose and Dan and I have had conversations, kind of nice, we're on lunchroom duty together, so we do some of our best work there. But we talk about how those students are, they're in a group of similar students, and you can see the tension just released from their body. They're just comfortable, and they love being in there. And it just allows them to learn, and they want to learn, and they're feeling excited about their successes that they have. And we think that's showing up here. How much are they growing? It's a little difficult to see on this graph, but as you go left to right, it kind of is a percentage of, and the number on top is the number of students and how much they are, what percentage of gain that they're making. So as you go left to right, as you can see, there's some, both in reading on the left side there's 9 students that have made more than a 20% growth in a very short period of time. And same with math, there's 5 there. But they're all making substantial gains. And again, success breeds more success. And so they're excited, and we're excited. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it over to Dan, who's just going to give you a little overview of a little bit more specifics on what's going on in his class.
All right, in math, I've identified 5 different ways that my students need help and 5 different interventions that are on the menu that we can use at any time. So my students in the middle school that are at risk for failing math classes, they need skill interventions. They need somebody to sit down with them and figure out what skills they're lacking, if it's long division or multiplication of decimals, whatever those skills are, and they need one-on-one attention in practicing those skills. They need help on homework. They get stuck on an algebra assignment. So I've got college tutors that come into my room. I also do some of that myself. They need to practice their math facts. So we've got a great intervention called Extra Math, where they can practice their multiplication division facts and get caught up on that. They need problem-solving skills, and I've got an intervention called Thinking Blocks that's also on the iPad that they can use to help visualize how a word problem works and fit the pieces together and figure out how to solve word problems. And most of all, they need an individualized curriculum that can take them from kindergarten and diagnose where their gaps are and get them up to grade level. And so with the power of technology, you can see that 3 of these are tech-based, the Extra Math, the Front Row, and the Thinking Blocks, which frees me up to do homework help and skill interventions. So if you were to walk into my classroom, we'd probably have 10 to 12 students working, and they'd all be working on something different. I might be sitting down doing long division with a student. We might have a college tutor helping somebody else with an algebra assignment, and the others will be working on math fact fluency, problem solving, and an online curriculum called Front Row. We're going to show you some examples of some of the success stories that we've had, and there's quite a few of these. I'll show you 3 math. So the 3 lines, the top line, the orange line, is the Northfield district average. This is the MAP test, the MAP mathematics test. The yellow line in the middle is the national average, and then the blue line is this particular student. This is an 8th grade boy who you can see was significantly below average all the way through in the fall of 2015, and you can see that big bump there between the fall of 2015 and the winter of 2016. That's a picture of him getting caught up to grade level in math. And actually, the dotted line there is projected what it predicts that he'll do, and basically it doesn't believe that that's true. So it's predicting that here, we think he'll still go up. So he was projected really to only go to there, and he's already there this year. And that's after, like Greg was saying, about 3 to 4 months of instruction. Here's an EL student, 7th grade. Huge gap from where she was all the way through 5th and 6th grade, and then she popped up to national average there in one semester. And here's another 6th grade EL boy who was flatlined for a couple years there, and then popped up and is on his way up to grade level. Okay, I'll put Rose on.
So in the reading intervention, I am using different strategies than what Dan is using, but I have a variety of things going on. I have the college students that are in my room as well. So we both started with something called Compass Learning, which has been a pleasure and a pain all at the same time. As you notice, it's no longer on Dan's screen. But I wouldn't be here today without Dan or without Compass. So Compass Learning has been a great tool for our students. It's on the iPad, and they are able to, what it does, and we talked about this in the fall, it actually drills down to the very specific needs that those students have. So based upon their scores from their MAP test, we can then see where they need to have instruction. And I forgot to check this week, but last week I think I had delivered like 2,760 some individualized activities for those students to work on, which, let me just say, I could never do that without that program. Before we could get Compass up and halfway running, I started with the Great Leaps intervention, which may be familiar to some of you. It focuses on 3 different areas. It starts with phonics, and then it talks about phrases, which is similar to sight word work from elementary school, and then it goes into the story as well. And Hope tried to convince me that my students needed to see what that was all about, and I said I didn't believe her, so I brought a machine that has jelly beans or little candies in it, and I promised my 8th grade boys a penny for every page of saying ba, da, ka, and just working on the phonics. And it blew me away to find out that they did not know those things. And so I don't know, I can't attribute at this point in time, you know, which came first and which helped them, but it was so much fun to actually see that that was their area of need and to tell them that they weren't dumb, they just hadn't had the right instruction at the right time in order to be successful in school. I have also worked with another intervention, iLit, and I use that with some 6th graders. I did not put that on the slide because of Fidelity, that's a program that needs to be taught every single day, and I only see my students every other day. And so I've stopped using that, but that is something that Mr. Gelano is really working on trying to have as an intervention for more students next year. And then some of you are familiar with Dibbles, and you know that that goes through the 6th grade reading level, and I had lots of students that couldn't read at the 6th grade reading level. So I have Kelsey Klug coming from the Torch program to help Dibbles test the students, and if they're beyond the 6th grade, we use the 6-minute solution grade level stories to really get at what their fluency levels are and trying to improve their fluency. So here is a 7th grade boy, and I chose this particular student because if you notice in the, I don't know, Dan, I can't do any of this without you, but I'll try. So if you notice, here is the fall of 2014 to 15, and you see a nice growth upward on this blue line. And then the summer comes along, and we've talked about summer slide before. And then in less than half of a school year, we see this really nice achievement with this young man. And so I think that's really exciting to see. And again, that little dotted line is going down because he probably doubled what his winter growth score was. This young lady, a 6th grader, was obviously struggling through the summertime. When she came back to school, that wasn't a whole lot of help for her either. But in a very short amount of time, she not only reached where she was in the spring of 2014, but she has jumped ahead of that as well. And the last one is really a special kid to me. You could take a look at the the spring of 2014 to the fall of 2014. And then I had him in my 7th grade classroom last year, and I was amazed at the things that that young man did, and I was feeling pretty good about that. And then look at what he did in just probably about 2 months of working with Compass, and has made some fabulous strides. And again, the gold line is the national norm, and then the orange line is our fabulous achievers in Northfield. So that is a lot of fun for me to have that. I don't think anyone's mentioned, these students are all getting the extra scoop, so they have an hour of their actual grade level instruction, so they're expected to grow at their grade level at the same time that they make some changes. And the other 30% that maybe didn't reach their potential for growth, they might have stayed the same. A couple of kids dropped, but many of the kids grew a fraction of what their growth was expected. So that's one thing that we don't have in our data.
I did forget to say 2 comments. First of all, the classes are every other day classes, and we are having regular conversations on whether in 6th grade we should change that. We should do a little bit more intensive and do everyday classes in 6th grade with the hopes of basically working ourselves out of a job in 8th grade. So that conversation is kind of going on. The other piece is Rachel Hudson's not here, and Rachel is our school psychologist, but she's also part of our MTSS team. And both Rose, Dan, and Rachel, they meet daily. And then I join them a couple times a month to check in as well. But she's also a vital part of their team as they look at student data and programmatical changes and tweaks that they need to do on a regular basis. With that, I'll pass it back to Cheryl.
Thank you. We are learning a lot this year. We are learning a lot about ADSYS intervention and the implementation of that process. We are learning a lot about even more about our data and digging deeper as we learn who our students are and how we can intervene with them. And I think what we're seeing today in our presentations across both of the schools that have presented today, we are seeing phenomenal results in a very short period of time because of these folks here that are doing this intervention work. We have some new tools that we're using. We're learning more about those. And while we have a lot of computerized programs that we have access to or more access to today, it's not just because of those programs. It's not the electronics. Yes, it might keep some kids engaged. It might need a different kind of a learner. But it's because of the intervention, because of the attention of teachers like Rose and Dan and the other interventionists that we are really seeing what we are already seeing here with our intervention. And I would say Carrie and the folks at the high school. It's really, they have done such a wonderful job of implementing the whole piece of the whole MTSS piece across the district and have been paying attention to that over the years. And Hope, I have to say thank you to Hope, because as our DAC, she is keeping everyone in the knowledge that they need with their data and all of the support she has provided and having folks look and dig deep into their data and say, what is this telling us about our learners and where are we headed? Where are these students headed? And I think some of our students that never had hope before have hope about learning and achieving. So today, I started out earlier saying that our goal is to reduce the referrals to special education. And one of the data pieces that we had to report mid-year, and we'll have to report again in September, is our referrals to special education. This is not the whole picture, it's just a little snippet of what's happening so far, and I think there's a deeper analysis than what the numbers show here. If you can see that from the students that are receiving ADSYS in each of the buildings, there are a number of students that are being referred to special education for evaluation. We know that we are targeting the lowest 20% of students. These students have been usually receiving RTI intervention possibly, as you saw in those graphs, for maybe a couple of years, or intervention within their classrooms, and not making the gains that we would normally expect. We put in an intensive intervention and for a short period of time, and we take that data and we look at that data over time. We change the intervention if it's not working, and if a student still is not moving, we really need to refer that student for special education evaluation, because there is now probably a suspected disability with some of our students. We look at the fidelity of those interventions as we do that. That's very, very important. Overall, our referral rates, you can see those there. Some buildings are higher than others. Our overall reduction goal is there on the right. We're looking at dropping our referral rates by about 5% in each building. So Bridgewater, 24 to 20. Well, we're already at a referral rate of 17 students mid-year. So that gives us an indication that we're kind of on the high side of the number of referrals and might not meet our goal this year. But you know, this is our first year with our ADSIS intervention, and we know again that some of our students are receiving a very intensive intervention after a few years or multiple years of RTI intervention and intervention within the classroom. So that's not the whole story, and we'll look to see what happens by the end of the year in our report in September to the fall. So thank you for your attention, and thank you again to all the MTSS and the ADSIS folks.
Okay, thank you. Wow, that's amazing. Board members, I know there may be questions or comments that board members want to make. So, if anyone has some. Margaret.
I'm just thinking, for me, this is very emotional. Because as a school board member, this is amazing. Then I think about how good you guys must feel when you see that data come back. And then especially with that last slide, how good that kid feels. That they're achieving. And they're, like you said, Rose, you know, in our childhood, people would have just given up on them. And that's just so not what's happening now, and this is just amazing. It's amazing.
Ellen.
So yes, it absolutely, I can see why, Joel, when you told your boys that you wanted to come, why you did. So I had a question for the middle school, and then I wanted to get Carrie to tell a story that she had told at DPAC about the high school. But my my question for the middle school is, so I understand that you're looking at maybe doing it every day. I was curious also as to how this worked with their other instruction. So is there any sort of integration between the two, or is it pretty distinct?
Part of the ADSIS minds that we had, the criteria that we had to do was Dan and Rose monitor students in all their content areas. So they talk to students about how they're doing in their other subjects. So that's kind of how they dovetail. I know both of them, Dan will meet with math teachers and kind of try supporting what's happening in class. Rose has done some of the same thing. She happens to be housed on the 6th grade side this year. So I know there's been a couple times where she's known of tests and stuff happening, and so she takes a bird walk. And they have the flexibility of doing that, which has really been beneficial, and it's another reason why those students have connected with both of them.
Okay, thanks. So Carrie, you had talked about at DPAC how, you know, how the absence, you know, wasn't all that sexy, but then you told this whole story about, you know, here looking at absenteeism and class schedules and math and busing. Do you remember the story?
Well,
and it connects all of those pieces. Or was
right. I know about the busing. Did I say something
so
about
you
the
said
busing?
how it turns out that the one elder book is often first hour. And when you looked at absenteeism, a lot of students were missing first hour. And then you looked geographically, and it was a lot of students on the same bus, and it was
Right.
the early, was that Marnie?
Right.
The earliest bus that was coming in.
Right. Right. So our first, well, I'm not really sure. So our first, the first run we took at that excessive absence data
Yes.
showed that it was only significant for the Hispanic population. And so, and I brought it to Joel and to Marnie and said, oh my gosh, like 35% of our Hispanic cohort is missing greater than 12% of their instructional time. And we talked about it at PBIS, and I think we talking about someplace else, and Marnie said, oh, I think that has to do with the busing. Because we have students who are picked up in a 2-tier busing situation, that they go north of town and then they come back. And so we have some of our Hispanic students are at school at 7:15, much earlier than I am. So and if they miss the bus, they don't have the transportation to get here. And so we're kind of contributing, we're creating a barrier to their participation. Is that the story, Ellen?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, I love the data, but I think hearing the story and how all of that ties together and how by you all digging into this data, you find this story for what's happening with the kids, that there's these things that we could be looking at solving that it's not even on our radar. So I really liked that story.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other board members, questions, comments? Oh, Jeff.
Thanks for your reports. One of the things that's obviously evident in today's culture is just there's a lot of people out there working without a net. I mean, the family system is not working. Just a lot of broken families, and just you use the word interventions a lot, but I just, you know, I think that peer-to-peer is one of the best ways to look at that, and I think that, you know, we have a pretty high standard, and I'm kind of almost amazed at the GPAs across the board and how high that is, and that you can really identify these people and just kind of lift them up where they're at and make sure that they're doing the work, and you can just motivate them to do better. And I think that by giving a lot of those kids the opportunity now, I mean, you're just setting them free for a much better lifestyle and a vocation in the future. So thanks for doing that.
No.
Excellent report. Thank you for your work, and your exuberance is contagious.
Other comments, board members? Yes, I echo what everyone said. I mean, absolutely just blew all of us away clearly. And I think, Marnie, you're always so good at talking about the non-academic barriers. And I think that there's just, you know, you're kind of peeling away this onion and seeing all the layers, and it's just really fascinating. I did have one question. The ADSYS grant, we have felt like that funding is somewhat sustainable, that we should be able to just be in good position to more or less feel good about sustained funding?
The ADSYS funding is available to us it's a 2-year cycle, and next year we would apply again for that continued funding for another 2-year cycle. That's the process.
Part of the thing that Cheryl continues to remind me of is we don't call it the ADSYS grant.
No, it's not a grant.
That basically this is funding that the department has determined through the federal government that they can strip out of special education to provide intensive support to students to hopefully reduce the number of students that eventually become part of special education, which is why the data that Cheryl shared at the end really looked at a target in terms of the reduction in the number of referrals to special ed. Correct. So what we understand is that as long as we continue to do what we're expected to do, and again, you folks need to know that Cheryl and the team basically just got back a really strong and positive report from the department about the quality of work that we've done in this first year, that we believe that this is not going to be one of those things that's like a demonstration grant where it goes away. That this is money that as long as we continue to do the kinds of things we're doing will continue into the future. And that's so refreshing from both the feds and the state, because, as you know, that's always been the key issue with a lot of things, is that it's kind of the bait and switch. You know, let's have you come do this, and we'll give you money for the first couple of years, and then, oh, by the way, didn't you know after the first 2 years you need to be able to fund it yourself? Well, the reality is we have resources spread about as thin as we can spread them. So
that's right.
The positive of this is it really does have the potential to be an ongoing funding stream. And again, I really appreciate the the enthusiasm of the staff working on this. It's great. Excuse me.
I'm sorry. I did did have one other question for Cheryl real quick. You talked about the profile of this, oh, I'm sorry. You talked about the profile of a student based on the criteria set forth with the funding. Is that something that you would envision them modifying, or would you want them to be able to give you more flexibility within identifying those students, or is that sort of set in stone and that works?
Well, there are specific areas that we have to look at, and we have to have data. But the district actually determines what group of students we are going to target. We take our student data and we make it applicable to our student demographics.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, good. Well, we'll let all of you people go on with your evening, and thank you so much for being here for the amazing report. Thank you. Okay, so we'll shift gears here. So next, board members, the next item for discussion and report is the superintendent search process. So as you're aware, we did appoint a subcommittee of Rob, Ellen, and myself. Our report and summary of our recommendations were in your packet. And Ellen is going to provide now an overview of the subcommittee's work and recommendation. And then we'll have time for questions and discussion.
Sure. So I thought what I would do is talk you through some of the thinking and discussion that we had as a subcommittee, and really what's reflected in the what's proposed in front of you are sort of 3 decisions that we came to as a subcommittee. So the first decision we made was to use a search firm, and back in 2004, the board that chose Dr. Richardson did use a search firm. So there is some history there. But what we thought is that as a board, we wanted to step back. We didn't want to rely on any preconceived notions we have as a board, but rather have an independent process, and that included engagement with stakeholders, groups that would identify really those qualifications that would come from the community. So we wanted to take that step back. We wanted to have someone who had knowledge of state statutes, could take care of vetting the candidates, would have knowledge of superintendent compensation, and would have interview expertise. So we really felt like we wanted to look outside the board for that expertise. So that was our first decision. The second decision we made was, and what we're proposing, is that the board consider hiring Dr. Kite from Peer Solutions to be that search firm. Dr. Kite is highly qualified. He has been a teacher, a principal. You may recall he was superintendent in Northfield. He was the executive director of the Minnesota Association for School Administrators, as well as being highly qualified as the search firm. What we also liked about Dr. Kite was that he has knowledge of Northfield. And then the third piece, which I think is really unique, is that he is a resident of Northfield. So he will be at the same grocery stores as we are next year, and in terms of not being a search firm that swoops in and out. So that's the second decision. The third decision that we came to in our proposal to you is the process. And I wanted to talk through a little bit about the process, and as you see, we also invited Dr. Kite to sit here because he might be able to field questions as well. But in conversations as a subcommittee and in consultation with Dr. Kite, we were talking through what would be the best process to identify the most qualified and best fit candidate for Northfield given our current context. And what we fell on was this 2-phase process that begins with an internal search and allows for an external search. So the first step is to gather stakeholder input. That's really important to us. And Dr. Kite would be gathering stakeholder groups, both face-to-face and an online survey. And the online survey is important so that folks that would not be able to make the meeting times, or that might not feel comfortable in public voicing whatever they wanted to share. And this is independent of any candidate. This is really looking at creating an ideal candidate profile that's separate from any person, or in mind, just in general, what do the stakeholder groups think an ideal candidate profile would be. So Dr. Kite's vision would be that the board would not be present. This would be something that would be independently conducted and synthesized. What this ideal candidate would provide in terms of a profile is a framework to guide our decision making, so that we would be drawing from stakeholder input and using this sort of transparent and independent process to help us in our decision making. It would also be of high value for whoever the successful candidate would be later to have that sort of input that was drawn. So step 2, in terms of we'd have this position would be posted internally, and then qualified candidates would be interviewed. The board would be really involved in observing the interviews and would be participating as part of the interview groups. Once again, Dr. Kite would be leading the effort there for his firm if we were to, if we go forward with this proposal. And then step 3 is an important decision point. At that point, we could choose to extend an offer, or we could broaden and to include external candidates, and that we would be going into phase 2, which includes an external search, vetting candidates, and an interview process as that would be phase 2. So I think that kind of outlines the 3 sort of decisions we made as our subcommittee. And I think Julie and Rob, I don't know if there's points you want to add or open it up to questions.
I think we can open it up to questions. So this is really meant to time to really fully discuss and ask any questions of either the subcommittee or Dr. Kite, who was gracious enough to be here tonight, so we thank him for that. So yeah, so we really, as a subcommittee, I guess we're really interested in hearing your feedback and being able to really discuss your thoughts. So, Margaret,
I'll go. Yeah. After reading through the proposal from Peer Solutions and reading the memorandum from the group, it looks like a really great process. I especially like that we will be involving stakeholders in creating sort of the profile of the ideal candidate and using online tools. I think that's wonderful. And that the search firm would set up an interview process that would include groups of staff, administrators, community members, and so on. I think this is a really wonderful, transparent process, and that it starts with an internal search, which I think is prudent. If it turns up the great candidate is outlined by these groups, then we're being economical, I guess, and effective. So I'm just very impressed with the outline proposed by Peer Solutions.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Other questions, comments? Noel?
I like all components of it, in particular the sequence that can be established as we proceed. We're not locked into the second one until we complete the first one.
Right.
Okay. Fritz?
So to be clear, I'm pleased with the process, but I'm curious, are there precedents for the internal search in Minnesota in recent history?
I'm Charlie Kite, you're referring to up here. Yeah, in fact, one district that has done it very successfully is Fridley. District roughly the size, and used a very similar process. I'm aware of a few others, but I wasn't really involved in them specifically.
And that's within the last 10, 15 years?
In the last 4 years, probably.
Other questions or comments? I just would like to add to what Ellen said. I think what I love is that we'll have all these great community input meetings, and I think anytime as a school district we can be out there listening to our community, that makes us so much better. And I think it really does give the new superintendent, a really valuable set of input from the community, and it kind of talks about thought exchange, right, where we say, oh, what we've heard Thought Exchange say is that we can sit and think about, well, here's what we think that they may say, and we may hear some other things, and so I think it's just a really excellent opportunity, and it's a way to continue to engage our community and our school district issues, which is always a good thing. And I know we're going to have some pretty sort of intentional effort to get community members that maybe aren't as engaged in the school district, but certainly are affected by decisions within the school district, business leaders, et cetera, that always show their support, but this will be a way to really pull them in, and that may be more of an intentional effort because they're not as easy as a Skylert or those types of things. But I think as a result of Thought Exchange, I think we've just developed some databases, and I think it's excellent that a lot of those community members did get the recent Thought Exchange, and now we're coming back and saying, gee, we want you to be engaged here too. So we're really trying to reel in the community to be involved, so I think it's excellent. So what then I'm hearing through your comments and other is that the board is comfortable moving forward with the recommendations of the subcommittee, which would include retaining Dr. Kite and Peer Solutions, and then moving towards the phase 1 internal search. Okay. So any other comments? Okay. Or questions? So we could move in then to the item for individual action, in which we can then formally approve the contract with Peer Solutions. And I know based on the results of that, Dr. Kite has some additional discussion that we will have. So if the board's amenable, let's move forward with the item for individual action. So is there a motion to retain Peer Solutions to conduct the district superintendent search process at a cost not to exceed $13,000? Moved by Noel, second? Second by Ellen. So any final discussion on this? Okay. Just one thing I did want to point out in terms of the bid, the phase 1 would be $6,000, and then if we would go to phase 2, that would be an additional $6,000 with about approximate of $1,000 in expenses. So that's how we tallied the $13,000. Okay, so I guess we're ready to vote. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Dr. Kite, you've just been hired.
Okay, thank you. This was a lot shorter trip than the drive I took to East Grand Forks to do this exact same thing a couple of months ago.
So I know there was some other things you wanted to discuss, so we can, I know it's a little bit out of the ordinary, but we'll move forward now that
and
we know.
I'll go very quickly, and I have a handout for you.
Yeah, no worries, this is good.
Get these out to everybody. These are
Oh, yeah.
I'll just get this as a one-page handout to see if I can manage this without making a big mess here. And there's one decision you have to make yet tonight. Here, I'll get to that.
Do you have one for him?
I do.
This would be the time for everyone to dig out their calendar.
And if you'd be good enough, you could just move these around the table.
Do you want me to take the
And I'm leaving you my card, so if anybody has any questions whatsoever, here, actually back here to the microphone. If you have any questions whatsoever, just my email and my phone number's on there. Just go ahead and call me. Just very quickly, our initial plan is to wait until just after Easter break and then do the focus groups. And you can see that we've identified some dates, and we have a list of the groups that we think we should meet with. If somebody thinks there's another group, you can certainly email me or call me, and we'll try to figure out how to add them in. But we're trying to cover a whole range of people. Most of these will be groups. School board members, you're going to get an email from me, and I'm going to ask you if you could just meet with me personally, and if you can't do that, to at least have a phone conversation with me. And those can actually happen before the March 29th date, just depending on your schedules. The online survey, I make a couple of comments there. The online survey is ready to go. We'll get it posted probably tomorrow or the next day, along with a very nicely written letter signed by all of you, or at least with your names on the bottom, telling the community what the process is. And finally, an email that will go out to all staff members explaining the process to them and the inclusiveness that we want to have. Now, if you turn over to the next side of the page, the interview, phase 1 interview date options. I think some of you, hopefully you've got your calendars, to see what would be a good time to do this. And I spoke with Julie today, and we can arrange so that the interviews, which will take about 6 hours, of each group interviewing the candidate or candidates, culminating with the board doing the interviews. You could start those mid-afternoon and finish them at 9 o'clock at night, or you could start them about noon and finish them by 6 o'clock in the evening. So that's kind of a decision point you'll have to make. But I think I'll just turn it over to Julie to just maybe see if you can check these dates out with the board to see who is available, and if we could possibly nail a date down today. That way, none of you will wander off, and I won't wander off. We'll all be there for the critical time.
So, thank you, Charlie, or Dr. Kite.
Charlie is just fine.
Okay, sorry.
In fact, when I worked here, I can always remember going over to Greenvale School, where the teachers all said, "Hello, Dr. Kite," and all the kids said, "Good morning, Charlie." I always thought that was kind of cool.
So, sort of understanding how the interview process works, the only question I would have, because I know we have in the past had the interview teams of the different stakeholders, is how we feel that we would be able to get community members. Because, Charlie, then a community member interview team would have to be available during the day. Is that correct?
That's correct. The community group would just precede the board interview.
Okay.
So depending on what time you do the board interview, you can do the community group before that. And we'll do the community group by invitation. We'll try to get a good cross-section of the community, and we have we really have 3 weeks here to get that established. So I think whenever we do it, we should have pretty good luck getting those people here.
Okay. So then we're feeling like we would be able to get a good cross-section of the community, asking them to come during the day. I mean, I know for some that would require having to take time off or leave work early kind of thing.
What time are we talking about when we say
that's,
during the day?
Yeah, because that would be...
Well, just work it backwards.
Okay.
If you have some board members that are going to be tied up in the evening, let's say you'd like to be done by 6:30. You'd like to do the interview then, in my opinion, from between 5 and 6 o'clock. You need a little bit of time between the time the board interviews and the time we give you all the information from the other groups. You need a good half hour to absorb that. It actually goes pretty fast, but you need to absorb that. So then you work your way backwards from about a community group from 3:30 to 4:30, maybe an administrative, maybe a teacher group or a staff group, I should say, from 2:30 to 3:30. Administrative group from 1:30 to 2:30. I would actually put a little bit of space in between those because you're moving people. So, you know, Danita probably would, under that scenario, we'll probably get started around, I'd say, 12:30. And we try to minimize the amount of time that people have to be away from their particular station. If you do the evening and you think in terms of your board doing the interview from 7 to 8 o'clock, let's say, now you can work yourself backwards from there. And we'd probably start right around 2:30 in the afternoon. And those are rough times.
And then, so that would put the, just thinking with, if the board were to find a date where we could go into the later evening, then that would be the community group. Could do 5:30. That seems a little... I mean, there's also... Okay. Because really, ideally, in the schedule, we're looking for that process to be the 5th, 6th, or 7th of April. Is that correct?
That's correct. And Julie and I actually talked about going the next week. But what you want to keep in mind that if you don't find the candidate you want internally, you still have to post it externally, and you have to do the interviews. And so time is of some essence here. And actually what's slowing this down just a little bit is the fact that there is spring break, which we just have to wait until we're finished with. So be it.
So if we were to just initially, if I were to ask board members if they're how they feel about going as late as 8 p.m. and if there would be an evening, because it's really important. We do have to find a date that all board members can be at the interview. So if we were just to start the conversation by saying, is there an evening of 5th, 6th, or 7th of April that board members could be available by, would we say 7 p.m.?
And maybe I would just suggest that you maybe take it the opposite way. Maybe find out who can't be available. That might be just a little quicker for you.
So is there anyone who wouldn't be available on the evening of Tuesday, April 5th?
Julie?
Yes.
Don't our board member is going to be there for part of the other interviews though as well?
One of the things that we recommend is that for those board members that may be available, that you actually quietly sit in the back of the community group interview. Be unobtrusive so that people don't feel constrained by what they might ask or what kind of discussion takes place, but it does give you an opportunity to observe your candidate in front of a group of people and see what type of people and delivery skills they actually have. It's certainly not mandatory that everybody be there, but at least if some of the board can be there. In my experience, especially if you're doing community groups late in the afternoon or very early in the evening, often you'll maybe have 5 board members there just because it just doesn't work out for everybody, and it's okay.
Okay. So with that being said, then that community meeting would be as early as 5:30 with the board at 7. And these are all kind of rough sort of estimates of times. We'd obviously get back with a firm interview team schedule. So as board members look at their calendars, Tuesday, April 5th, if we were to go to that later evening, is there anyone who would have a conflict? Really? Wow. That was easy. Okay. So I think then
I'm just going to suggest you do check the other 2 dates just to be sure.
Okay.
Just in case we run into
Sure.
something
Yeah, good idea.
crazy.
So then how about Wednesday the 6th? Would there be anyone who would have a conflict? Okay. And the 7th, April 7th. Is there anyone who would have a conflict? Rob, I thought you had maybe had a conflict on the 7th.
Oh, that's right. It's
the poet.
It's the community gathering for Northfield Reads that the Human Rights Commission sponsors. So there might be community members who are at that, but if that's in the evening.
Okay. Yeah, I know because we had identified that as possible, David. That was when we were thinking earlier. So I know you had said that's a conflict, and that's an important event you want to be at. So I think what I've heard then is either Tuesday, April 5th, or Wednesday, April 6th. Okay.
And which one would you be most comfortable with?
Well,
maybe to stay away from Wednesday evening?
I think we should stay away from Wednesday evening if we can, because we would be asking community members at 5:30 on a Wednesday evening. So I think we should stay away from that and really focus maybe on Tuesday, April 5th, and making that work.
Well, for you then on April 5th, mark your calendars. If you can make it to the community meeting, which will be roughly at 5:30, that would be great. And other than that, you should plan on being here for sure by 6:30, because you're going to need a solid half hour to read some feedback that you're going to get, and then you'll be ready to go at 7. Now, just a couple other quick things, because I probably won't see you before all of this happens specifically, but we will be sending out to you a whole list of suggested interview questions and a process by which I'll help you to figure out which ones you want to ask. You'll also have some opportunity to ask questions in the interview based on some of the feedback you got from the other groups that you might want to tease out. I'll also work with your chair and your committee a little bit to make sure that we have a pretty good understanding of what contracts look like and compensation and that type of thing, so that we have as many of those type of details worked out behind the scenes. Other than that, really Danita, who's going to be my once again assistant, and I will put most of the pieces together and have it rolling. So expect as early as tomorrow or Wednesday, you'll see some information coming out to the community on the website and to the staff, and you'll know what the process is. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Any other final questions for Dr. Kite? Ellen?
So one of the things is gathering for the community sessions where you're gathering stakeholder input. Board members providing names to Julie or reaching out to people once we have an actual date and time for the community members?
Well, there will be two. Remember now, there will be two community meetings.
Right.
One will, I think, will be on the evening of the 29th. That's just the focus group gathering information. And then there will be, on April 5th, there will be a more formalized group. And I would suggest that if you'd like to, even tomorrow, if you wanted to send some names to Danita. Otherwise, what we'll probably be doing is sending an email out to all of you and saying, give us just who your suggestions might be. And we'll try to bring that together. Remember, the first community group meeting on the 29th, we will invite people, but we'll also publicize it and make it open to the entire community. Anybody who wants to come to give us input is going to be real welcome. During the interview process, we'll try to get a good cross-section of the community, but it works best if there's 10 to a dozen people in that group. So it works better not to have a huge group. And I found that out the hard way when I did the interviews in St. Cloud. With one of the candidates, about 170 people showed up. And they were in three very distinct groups that didn't get along well with each other. But the candidate who was hired handled it. But I realized that I'd let that process get away from me just a tiny bit. Thank you.
So just one other point of clarification then, the Tuesday evening, the 29th, did we envision that? Because I know you envisioned parents and community members as separate. What group did we decide would be that Tuesday evening?
Okay. Well, on Tuesday evening, it'll be an open call to anybody who wants to come.
Okay.
The parent group we referred to is we're going to suggest that each building principal gives us about 3 or 4 names of people and bring that smaller group together for a focus group. People who are a little bit more attuned to what's actually going on for sure in the buildings. And then the 29th meeting, you'll have parents there, you'll have some staff there, and hopefully you'll have a cross-section of community members that don't have children in school as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that clarification. So, Noel?
Does the announcement have to be made so we don't be the board isn't in violation of the open meeting?
Yes,
I can speak to that. We
yes.
will post wherever you're at. We will post that as a legal meeting, and the 3 days, or we'll probably post it even longer ahead. Now that we know the interviews will be on April 5th, Danita will probably get that posting out just right quick here. So, we'll also, when we do the only really place that you will have a public meeting is that evening when you're doing the formal interviews. But we'll actually set the posting time to include the time of the community group so that legally you have, even if you're in the back of the room simply observing, it will be a legal board meeting. We'll watch that quite closely.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that question, Noel. So, and as you guys absorb all this, obviously there'll be other questions. So please contact me and, or Danita. She's closely involved with what will be happening as well. So, any questions, comments, thoughts, please feel free to bring them forward. And
I encourage you, if you have questions, to just contact me. But my communications to you all, other than one communication saying I'd like to get together with you, what's a time, we'll typically go through your board chair, and it'll be her responsibility to distribute to the board. So we'll keep that as a good line of communication.
Okay, good, thank you. Well, we appreciate everything you've done so far and for
Thank you.
helping us move forward with the search.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Okay, good discussion. Thanks, everyone. Okay. So we will move on then to our next item for individual action, which is the 2017-18 school Calendar, we had the initial discussion on this piece at our last board meeting. We'll move now to approve the calendar. Is there a motion to approve the 2017-18 school year calendar as presented? Moved by Margaret, second. Second by Fritz. So before we proceed with the vote, is there any discussion or specific questions board members would have for Dr. Richardson about the calendar itself?
I just had one quick question.
Yes, Margaret.
Is it still state law that we must start after?
Yes, it
Yes,
is.
thank you.
Yeah, the only way you can start before Labor Day, given current state law, would be if you had in excess of $500,000 of construction going on at that time.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? I had one question. If we were to approve the calendar, how soon does that get posted for families? I know there's already some curious.
Keep in mind, this is 2 years away.
Right.
Because the 16-17 is already
Right.
posted. Well, I'll send it off to have it translated tomorrow. And so as soon as I get it back from the translator, it will go up.
Okay, wonderful. I wasn't sure because we're kind of new and working this far out, but the more information I think parents have, the better. Okay, good. So with that, no other questions or comments. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to the approval of the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were a number of items in the table file to be added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping?
Well, I just had a few questions on the agreement with the church, but
Okay.
then we should pull it. Should we pull it?
Then let's pull that item
Okay.
and move forward with motion to approve all of the consent grouping with the exception of the contract with the Canvas Church. So is there a motion to approve? Moved by Noel, second. Second by Ellen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's move on to an item for individual action then will be the Canvas Church contract.
Question? Go ahead.
Sure.
Okay. I was reading in the contract that this is a negotiated 10% reduction from established community use fees. Can you tell me more about that, why we would, what is our policy in giving certain groups a reduction in fees?
Erin is going to be able to share that with you because she's worked with this for multiple years.
Thank you.
So Canvas Church is one of 2 long-term contracts that we have, and Canvas Church and then the Northfield Swim Club, which is the association. And so that has, ever since we've implemented the facility policy, I believe in 2009, I think, those 2, which we currently have, that would schedule out for the year and remain consistent, and we would know on a regular basis what they're doing, they would then receive that 10% reduction. And it just is on the facility costs, not on the costs we have for electricity or anything like that. It's just on the facility rental.
Yeah, I saw the electricity fees. I was just wondering what the reasoning was for a
Volume
reduction.
discount.
Yep, just the volume discount, and then the swim club's contract would come, they are on a contract basis that starts September 1.
Okay, so we'll be seeing
So you will
something
see
very
theirs.
similar. Okay.
Yep, you'll see theirs as well.
Thank you. That is the only question I had.
Okay. So if we move forward, the item for individual action then will be a motion to approve the contract agreement with the Canvas Church. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Jeff, second. Second by Ellen. Motion a second. Any other discussion or questions? Okay. All those in favor of approving the contract agreement with the Canvas Church say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on now to items for information. Dr. Richardson, a few here. World's Best Workforce Report.
Okay, yes, I've actually got 3 items here in terms of items for information. The first on World's Best Workforce Report, we just simply wanted to share with you the data that we received back from the department. And as you remember, as we worked through the World's Best Workforce Report last year, there were a number of questions that the department raised about what did this report look like, did it have the elements that they wanted in it, etc. This year, they created a much more rigid template for us to respond to. And so basically, especially with the work of Hope Langston and Mary, they did a yeoman's work in terms of the development of the actual World's Best Workforce Report document. As you can see as you review this, the majority of elements they've identified as being right on target. So in terms of having a website link, in terms of having our annual public meeting, as you remember, or earlier in the year, the couple of places where our report still is not exactly what the department wants, and so we'll be working to fix those things over the course of this next year. First of all is the requirement of having student representation in terms of the group that works. And although we have a district youth council and DPAC, what they made really clear to us is that having the two groups working but not necessarily working together doesn't address what they want to see happening, which is that student roles must be represented. Although we had a very balanced looking representation overall for all the other groups. So what Mary and Hope have already discussed is the concept of asking representatives from the District Youth Council to attend DPAC meetings and have an opportunity to share information that they have, as well as hear kind of the thrust of what's going on with DPAC at that particular time. So we'll be able to make sure that we have a voice of students at the table in terms of DPAC, and I think that will get that taken care of. The second piece where we are going to need to continue to make some adjustments is in terms of the All Students Ready for Kindergarten. Remember, this is the issue that we dealt with at the beginning of the process, where the state of Minnesota initially identified certain assessments that we could use, and we worked to try to identify one of those assessments, chose the kindergarten gold standard in terms of the measurement device. We had our staff go to training to learn about it, said this is really unwieldy, it's very difficult to use, and the department then, very close to the beginning of the school year, said, well, okay, what about this other option, which is called FAST. And our folks looked at the FAST appraisal system, said this is a much better, more usable process. But obviously, as we had developed the initial goal material, we were building it on the gold standard piece. And so in moving from that to FAST, what they've identified for us is that you didn't set the goals based on the process you were going to use, even though the process we are going to use wasn't available from the department at the time that we had to complete it and turn it in. I suppose I'm getting kind of snarky now that I've got less than 4 months.
To fly the plane.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, well, we added the other wing to the plane, but it was only after you'd taken off and you're flying at about 30,000 feet. So we know we can get this piece addressed pretty simply, because as we go into next year, we now have the FAST appraisal system in place. We think it's going to be much better. Our staff likes it better. They really think it gives them good data, and it's easy to complete, so, or at least easier to complete. So we believe that will address both the SMART goal and the result piece for the coming year. Then as you see the other goals that are really the accountability goals in place, the third grade literacy piece, again, that's identified as being successfully identified and done, and also the results are there that they're looking for. Same thing for the closing of the achievement gap, same thing for the career and college ready. The interesting thing here is that if you remember with these, none of these goals in last year did we have district goals. We had building goals, which is what we told them all along was the right way to do this. So when we put the material together and sent it off to the department, we basically started out each of the segments by saying, we were not comfortable initially doing a district goal. We felt that individual building goals fit the criteria because we were measuring things going on at each of the buildings to determine whether we were, in fact, on track. For whatever reason, they took all of our all of our building goals and said, okay, that looks okay. And despite the fact that in the past they told us that was not going to be appropriate, they now have indicated to us in all three of those areas it is perfectly okay. So as we go into the next year with this, it is likely that we're going to try to identify a district goal to include as a SMART goal and a result there, but we're also going to be, I believe, continuing to put the building goals in because that really fits what we do with our school improvement planning process. It really reflects, I think, a more honest view in terms of how we're performing, and it really fits what our fundamental approach has been over the years of saying that what we're really trying to do is identify the 30,000-foot goal at the district level and then let the actual measured goals be building level goals. And the interesting piece is the one goal where we believe we had it nailed. Because remember, the state's goal here is 90% graduation rate. If you remember last time we talked about the fact that our goal of attainment for this year is 96 point something percent in terms of all students. It's 93% in terms of Latino students, and it's 91% in terms of free and reduced price lunch students. What you'll notice is that our goal was not found to be acceptable. And so we're going to have to do some rethinking about how we present that. Because remember, the way we presented it was, we said, we will meet or exceed the state's goal. They don't like that. That isn't how they wanted it written. So in a SMART goal format, my sense is they're going to want us to rate. We anticipate that we will maintain a 95% goal for our district. We think that I'll stop. But the reality here is there is no issue that we have in terms of our graduation goal. We're nailing it in terms of the work that's being done, but they want us to basically write it in a different format, which does not reflect the state as being our target. The state goal as being the target for the district's goal. Again, we don't know why. As far as the other pieces that have been put in place in terms of needs being data-based, the responses being 200 words or less, all of that matches for identified needs, for system strategies and supports. Again, you'll notice all of those are clearly evident, inclusive, clearly evident, again, within the numbers. And our requirements in terms of evaluation for teachers and principals, again, includes a robust process and identifies a meaningful process in terms of evaluation, again, within the 200-word limit, and that our practices in terms of instruction, curriculum, technology, and collaborative professional culture are fully integrated across the district, and again, within 200 words. Because remember, in each of these, we had to be able to share everything that we needed to about how we were doing in our district in 200 words or less. So my sense, and I guess we were, as you notice, it says the process to develop collaborative culture is well articulated and fully integrated, and the process to evaluate the effectiveness of instruction includes input from stakeholders. It's research-based. So basically, the comments that we've heard in terms of each of those pieces about data use, about formative assessment use, would indicate that we're right on target. To say that we were pleasantly surprised by the outcome of this is probably an understatement, because we'd anticipated from the previous year and how the data had come back to us that there would have been a lot more things that would have not been marked as being effective. I think overall the good thing in terms of the message here is that other than a couple things that we really believe we can address pretty simply, we came through with flying colors. So I think we're in a really good place in terms of World's Best Workforce. And given that World's Best Workforce, at least from the commissioner's perspective, is what she would like to see becoming kind of the core measure and the core addressing of how a district is doing based on the state's view. I think if we can be in a position where the state comes back and tells us we're on track on all these areas, I think we're in a really good place to be. And I think in terms of the data coming back, now that we again have continued to massage ADSIS and other programs that we use for intervention and growth, I think we're going to be in an even better place to continue to move those pieces forward. So I sure would be willing to answer any questions for you. I have, again, no idea why the goal for the graduation rate was not acceptable, but the results were outstanding. Other than the fact that, again, I think they were into the detail of saying, unless you state an individual goal, saying, here's how the district is going to do in comparison to how they did last year, as opposed to saying, our district will outpace the state, which is what we did, I'm sure we would have been fine there. And my sense is the only other two areas are in terms of the kindergarten readiness goal, which we will have on track and on target as we go forward into next year. So I think we're in a really good place. Questions?
Good work, thank you. Questions or comments? Now, this is really an amazing report, and considering the effort behind each one of these is crazy, and so it has to be.
Well, and again, a real thank you to Mary Grace and to Hope. They did a phenomenal job, and not only in terms of getting the data put together and putting it in a very clear, crisp format, but also in terms of, because we had a long discussion about, are we going to just say, well, we didn't do a district goal and let it go? Or are we going to do the building level goals for each of these pieces and underwrite the fact that we didn't have the district goal with the fact that there were goals from each of the buildings that reflected those pieces? And I won, I guess, that discussion. It really came out, I think, extremely well, because what we were able to do is to show them exactly what we told them, which was when each building does what it's supposed to do in terms of being a part of the whole, that we really get to the same place as we're writing a district goal, but without having to write a district goal per se, if that makes any sense. Okay.
So it's a possible segue into the next item for discussion, which is the Every Child Succeeds Act, and the commissioners report Thursday at the legislature in terms of, I know you wanted to give us an update on that, but
sure.
How she sees World Best Workforce closely aligning with that. So
right, and she is basically believing that a lot of the new ESSA report, ESSA, which is now instead of No Child Left Behind or NCLB, the new terminology is ESSA, ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. And yes, the commissioner is really in a position where she's saying a lot of the work that's been done with World's Best Workforce is going to connect very well with that. What I would share with you, I guess, is just a few thoughts in terms of where we are with ESSA. Remember that in ESSA, there's really two parts in the process. The first part of the process was getting the old law repealed and the new law inserted, and that's done. And so back in December, when ESSA was passed, that sunsetted No Child Left Behind and implemented the new ESSA law. The problem is, just like any other law written at the federal level, really what determines exactly what it's going to look like is dependent on the regulations that are created. And the regulations, they have not even started to write yet. And there's a couple things going on there. So in terms of if we think about the regulations that the department put together for No Child Left Behind, a lot of the detail about the sanctions and a lot of the detail about what was pretty onerous structure and impacts that No Child Left Behind were placed on us were driven by the regulations that were finally created. What we know will be things that are definitely going to come out. There will no longer be any federal sanctions, period. So no annual yearly progress piece, no issues around you have to identify schools as being in needs of improvement, no issues requiring any kind of tutoring or other kind of programming if your school is not being successful. So there's some good positive things that have happened there. The flip side is all of the assessments 3 through 8 are right where they were. We have to have a math and reading assessment each year, 3rd through 8th. We have to have a science assessment 3 times during a student's career, so once in elementary, once in middle school, once in high school. The place where it gets fuzzier is in the area of the secondary, the senior high assessment. They are saying there must be an assessment at the senior high level and accountability at the senior high level. But what they've also indicated is that a state may choose to use a different assessment than the kind of assessment that we use in grades 3 through 8. Remembering that the assessment strategy for 3 through 8 has always been the state must write standards in terms of everything you want kids to know, do, and demonstrate in each grade level, and that then the test must reflect and measure each of the standards that have been provided. At the high school level, they are still saying that it must meet standards. However, they are also saying to states, you may choose to do a nationally normed college entrance exam for your secondary assessment if you're willing to back off on the standards that are not measured in that particular test. So, literally, a state could say, we want to use the ACT or the SAT test as our high school measure in reading and math and science. But to do that, they would have to say, if there's a standard that's currently written in our high school standards for students, those standards would have to be removed. Now, the state can do that. The state has total autonomy over the creation of the standards at the high school level. That's not a federal thing. That's a state thing. What we know right now is the department is really struggling with that because they love their standards and they think their standards are right on track. What we are concerned about is the fact that they're offering an opportunity to use a test that is inherently more valid and reliable because kids take it because they know they need to, and that it actually has some impact on their post-secondary chances, and whether it's a 2-year program, a certificate program, a 4-year program, whatever. But to do that, the state would have to say if there are any standards that we've identified as a state that aren't in the ACT or the SAT, we have to drop those out. And so far, the department wants nothing to do with dropping out standards that aren't on the ACT, that are not on the ACT or not on the SAT. So instead, what we're going to, I think, come down to in the battle in the end will be, do you continue to give MCA tests at the high school, which are not valid or reliable in terms of the fact that kids have no inherent motivation to do their best work, in order to make sure we hold in every standard that was ever identified for reading, math, and science? Or do we step back and say, are there some standards that have been identified at the high school level that several nationally normed tests are saying, we don't need to know how kids are doing on these in order to know how they're going to do in college or in a post-secondary program, and so we could take them out. My initial interactions with the state and especially with assessment divisions is they want nothing to do with that. Also, obviously, we're in the last year where we will be getting any funding from the state to support ACT testing. And we did get an additional year of funding from the state because Pearson really struggled with the testing last year. And so as part of the negotiated deal with Pearson, Pearson said, well, we will fund the ACT tests for one more year. But remember the tests now, where they used to be mandatory, if you remember, just a year ago, where we said every student will take the ACT at least once in 11th grade. So you actually would have a measure of every student's performance on the ACT. Now the ACT testing is voluntary. And so a student can take it if they want to, and it will be paid for by the state. But if they don't want to take it, they don't have to take it. And at that point, they still, because in the end, they still have to take the MCAs. So I have a feeling this is not anywhere near over in terms of this piece. But again, if the frustration is simply that, in my mind, while I can live with 3rd through 8th grade and the standards there, I struggle with the fact that we have 2 nationally normed tests, whether we use the SAT or the ACT, which every college uses as a measure of students' ability to matriculate into the college setting, and for which, when kids take the test, they are motivated, and so we have reliability and validity in the testing. And we're being told, no, we're not going to allow you to use those tests because we want to use the MCA test that has more standards in it than any college requires because we created the test.
But it's less.
Yeah. And the other issue, of course, is that after this year there will be no funding to maintain the ACT. However, if we just simply quit funding the Pearson high school tests, there would probably be money left over to do the ACT testing.
And wouldn't performing in the ACT be a piece of the world's best workforce?
That would be my sense, because that's, if we talk about career and college ready, the MCA doesn't do that. Although, again, the department would tell us, oh yes, it correlates very well. But it obviously can't correlate 100% because there are parts of the MCA standards that aren't in the ACT test or in the SAT test. So that's a big rock that still has to be dealt with at the state level. The other thing that is going to have to be addressed is still the lowest 5% of school district or schools performing in the state will still have to have an improvement plan and go through an improvement process. So we know that piece is still in place and needs to be continued. But again, the state will be totally responsible for how that work is done. That will no longer be a federal mandate or federal requirement. And so, when we look at most of the pieces of ESSA, it is a much better situation. Now, the snag that I talked about earlier that's also problematic is the fact that there really are no regulations yet, which means there's no rules in terms of exactly how you do it. Nobody's interpreted the law to say this is how it's going to work. And in a kind of a different move at the federal level, is they have determined that the rules and regulations will be negotiated rules and regulations. So typically the Department of Education is the one that just writes the rules. This time we have all these organizations that are being invited to send representatives to be part of the negotiated rules, and they have to be vetted and approved by the department before they are allowed to be part of the process. So we know the American Association of School Administrators, elementary and secondary principals, a number of other groups are requesting to have folks on that group, as well as a number of other organizations that are probably not as clearly tied to K-12 education as those groups are. So we don't know yet how much pushback that will be at the federal level in terms of trying to get those regulations completed and how long that might take. Our hope is that we won't be looking at longer than the beginning of the 17-18 school year before we'll begin to see implementation of ESSA. And so for 16-17, we're probably in the equivalent of federal no man's land, where we really are not operating under No Child Left Behind anymore. We're really not operating yet under the new ESSA, but we'll probably have bits and pieces of both. And the state will be in a more powerful position going forward. So that's kind of the nitty-gritty of where ESSA is right now. It has the potential to be much better. It is much more locally, state and local focus, a lot less intrusion by the federal government in terms of trying to control everything in education, all of which we ask for. But there are some things that they hung on to dearly, like the assessment every year in reading and math, for which we had some strong discussions about the fact that, do we really need to do that every year? Or could we have done it level by level and had a better situation for kids and not a test overload in terms of the number of tests that kids had to take? Questions I can answer for you about ESSA?
I think what's most interesting is really how far they still have to come in putting this together, and that's a real concern when you're talking about a lot of stakeholders and a lot of really just getting to the minute details of the actual regulations and the assessments and all of that, and how much work has to be done there. And the concern, of course, is for a school district, we've found really lack of time for us to put things together, and how much of a fire drill it will come to be. We could be cautiously optimistic, but we also have past history as precedents there. So it will be an interesting process. And speaking of the process, why board members may think of other questions, I'll just say I don't know if you saw through the Capital Connections, in terms of the commissioner wanting board members to weigh in on ESSA. So there's a number of listening sessions actually in April and May. So if board members are interested, they've delineated a lot of different pieces. And so as board members are interested, they are asking for our input into some of the issues with ESSA.
Yeah, and in that document, there's a list of all the different listening sessions that the department is going to do. Starting when, Julie?
April 25th.
April
so
25th.
The meeting topic, so they give 2 hours, and the meetings are all at the Department of Ed, which is right on St. Paul and Highway 36. So standards and assessment, accountability, including academic and non-academic indicators, school improvement, including differentiated school improvement, data collection and reporting, early learning, English learners, family engagement, social emotional learning, school climate, healthy learning environments, foster care and homeless youth. I believe homeless is one of the new categories that we have to track for performance achievement.
Which is really tied back, if you remember, the Bruce Vento Act that was passed several years ago now, which really the only piece that we had really dealt with Bruce Vento up to this point is the requirement that if we have a student that becomes homeless in our district and then goes to another district and still is maybe living in a shelter or whatever, we are required by state and federal law to bus that student from wherever they are back to Northfield so they can continue their education in the location where they were just before they became homeless. And so there's some real twists and costs that are there just because of the fact that the expectation is that the district in which when they first became homeless, becomes the district that must always get them back to the school that they were in before they were identified as homeless.
So again, that's a separate meeting topic, foster care and homeless youth. And the last is guidance regarding title programs and requirements. So starts April 25th, runs through the first part of May. Some are morning meetings, some are later morning, and some are early afternoon. So if board members are interested and want to sit in on a listening session with other school board members from across the state, that could be an interesting meeting to attend. So then, any other questions then on the ESSA? Okay, we can move on then to enrollment report for March.
Okay, again, if we take a look at the enrollment report for March, basically what you're seeing in terms of totals, as we pop back up again, we're at 4,004 students as of March the 1st. Again, our numbers are incredibly stable, and what we're looking at is, numbers of 500 or greater at each of the elementary buildings, about 940 students at the middle school, and just shy of 1,280 students at the high school. So the good thing is, as we take a look at overall numbers, again, we seem to be swimming against the stream in terms of expected drops in enrollment, at least to this point, which in the end will be a very positive piece for us in terms of the final funding level, because when we determine average daily membership, we've maintained that strong number pretty much all through the year at almost 4,000 students. So we're in a really good place as far as that goes. Again, in terms of the enrollment report, as far as numbers, again, as we've kind of shared before, while we have a few classes in each building that are in the 28 to 29 range, it tends to be 3 or less classes per building out of 24 sections.
We've commented on this before, but why are we traditionally so stable at around 4,000 or 3,900 and continue to be that way, as opposed to, a lot of other districts just struggling with
declining enrollment?
So
I think, I think there's several things that we'd have to take a look at. I think one is that we tend to continually draw in folks into the district who are looking at this as a destination for their families. They want to have their kids there. I think we also have, as Cheryl had shared with us in Cabinet the other day, over the last 2 years we've had an increase of about 80 special education students. And not all of those are students that were already inside our district. A number of those are students that came from outside our district and chose to come into Northfield because of the reputation and quality of our program. And so I think it's the combination. I think we have a good reputation as a school district. People believe strongly in the quality of program that we provide. And we also have a good reputation for our special ed programming, and that tends to draw additional students. So we've tended to be stable, even though we aren't really seeing huge numbers of new folks into the system. But pretty much we're now back to where most of the housing units that were empty in 2009-10 are pretty much filled back up again. However, we have not had a boom either of a lot of new housing units getting built.
Well, if you look at the class sizes, we're at our secondary, we're well into 300, and you have to go to elementary, and we have one class that barely reaches 300, and then you're in the high 200s, and then the kindergarten class of 251, we drop way down. So it's interesting, ebb and flow. Okay. Any other questions on enrollment? Okay. One other item for discussion or for information that was added in the table file was determining the need for a March 28th school board meeting.
And I guess here's just kind of the position we're in. As you remember, those of you that have been on the board for a while know that traditionally, unless we have that odd situation where we have kind of the fifth Monday, we typically are not in a position where we normally have a meeting, the second board meeting in March. As Danita and I have looked at the potential actions and activities, the one piece that would have been probably the focus for that second March meeting was the approval of the Prairie Creek contract. I've had conversations with the department and the charter school department in terms of MDE, and what we've asked them to do is that since we're having to, as part of our corrective action process, we're having to create a new contract with many more pages in it, and a new evaluation component that will be reviewed as part of that. I asked the folks at the department, I said, would you be willing to review our contract and our evaluation document before we ask the board of either Northfield or of Prairie Creek to adopt the contract? They said, oh, we'd be happy to do that. So our intent at this point is, if we can have a few more days, we will basically finish up the drafts of the new contract and evaluation document, send those off to the department, knowing that typically it takes them about 2 to 3 weeks to get them done. And then if they send it back to us with fixes or any fixes that need to be made, then at the first board meeting in April, we'd be able to come back to you with the department has blessed this contract and the evaluation document, and if you approve it and Prairie Creek approves it, the department is going to approve it. The alternative would have been to approve it locally at our next meeting, which would have been the 28th, and then if the department didn't like the contract or they wanted to change something, then we'd have to go back and get you to approve it again. So our thinking is it would be better to wait the extra 2 weeks and get that piece done. And because of that, it's a very quiet second meeting in March. And at this point, my recommendation to you is, as they would say in Frozen, let it go, let it go. And just not have a second meeting in March.
So board members, questions or comments about the consideration of not having a March 28th board meeting? It would extend everyone's spring break.
Well, the other thing I'm thinking is you're going to have at least one additional evening meeting with your moving through the process of identification of a superintendent candidate, and whatever other time that is, I think you will definitely get the work. You'll get your work time in, but maybe this would be a great opportunity to trade one for the other.
Okay, excellent. That takes care of items for information. Future meetings then will be Monday, April 11th at 7 p.m. in the High School Media Center, and then we'll continue to provide information that board members have on their calendar that Tuesday, April 5th for interview of internal candidates. So 2 additional things. We want to thank our new Northfield News reporter, Philip Way, for being here his first evening. We appreciate the work of the Northfield News and helping our community stay connected to school district. And we should probably say our goodbyes to Erin Bailey, who will probably be not be happy if she's here on Monday, April 11th.
Stay away.
Yeah.
Put me in my own corner if I'm here on April 11th.
Yes. Yes, we would want to put her in a very separate space.
So we wish you and Casey all the best, and we can't wait to hear the news. So. All right, so with that, a motion to adjourn. Moved by Noel. Second? Second by Jeff. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Motion carries.